Hey, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Rob Phelan. I am here with Ed Combs, and we're going to be talking today about a topic called mental health and money. Now, this is one that you don't normally get in a personal finance classroom. I would say there's very few of us teachers out there who would feel qualified enough, knowledgeable enough about this topic to bring it up in a classroom, and it wouldn't make its way into a normal curriculum anyway. This is not something that you would see on your budgeting, saving, investing standard curriculum that appears in classrooms across the US. But you're going to find out today how important this topic can be. And while you might say, yeah, well, I'm not affected by mental health challenges right now. This isn't me. This doesn't apply to me. I hope by the end of today, you're going to realize how much this could impact you directly, and then also your loved ones, those around you, your friends, your family, and that indirect impact on you is going to happen at some point in your life. I don't think any of us can say that we will walk through our entire lives and not know somebody personally who is working with some mental health challenges. And even if it's not diagnosed, you are still going to have something that pops up in your life that's going to knock you down or challenge you in a certain way. And it's going to impact your money. So we're tying two very big ideas here together. So you have mental health and financial health coming together, all part of your overall wellness. Other ones might include things like your physical health, your spiritual health. So these are all different health categories, and we're marrying two very big ones today. But Ed, let me bring you up. You are the person I picked for this one because let's just go through this. You are a certified financial planner. So you got the financial side. You are a marriage and family therapist. So you work in therapy, you help families and individuals with mental health challenges, personal problems, the full range. I want to learn a little bit more about that. And you're also a financial therapist. So you have already married the two of these together in your profession. What's a financial therapist?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, in simple terms, a financial therapist is very curious about a few things: people's thoughts, feelings, behaviors, their sense of who they are in the world, and their sense of who other people are. So, there's kind of, if you will, five big areas that we're interested in because those each impact and show up in all the spaces that we're trying to make money decisions. So, whether it's about saving and spending, or whether it's about investing for the future, or talking and looking at your taxes, or estate planning, or education funding. Those are the big financial planning areas. So that's the financial planner coming through in me. Is we have these big six, if you will, financial planning categories. And we have, as a human, we all have thoughts, we all have feelings, we all have behaviors, we all have a sense of ourselves, and we all have a sense of other people. Right. So when we bring that all together in a fruit salad, man, we got something fun.
Fun is the key word here. All right. So when you talk about your profession, if you are watching the replay or you're live, you should have a student reflection document available to you. And one of the questions on that is just about this profession. Like, I've never heard of it before, a financial therapist. Are you a mental health professional? Are you a financial professional? Are you both? And how does someone become what you are? Because I've never met someone with your title before.
Yeah. So what makes a financial therapist is someone that has training, typically starting either on the financial planning side or the mental health side of the professional continuum, and then they cross over and they start getting training on the other side. So there's an organization called the Financial Therapy Association, which is setting the standards for what people need to do to professionally be a financial therapist. How much personal finance knowledge do you need to have? How much counseling knowledge do you need to have? And then this middle space, which is how much financial therapy? Because the gap in our culture and society for professionals is financial planners get little to no training in psychology at all. Counselors get little to no training in money, technical issues around money. And yet there's a powerful intersection, and that's where financial therapy comes into play. And what we believe as financial therapists is that everybody has a personal relationship, personal history with money, and future expectations about money. That's universal, the globe around. Every person has it. And so we've got to be able to work with all of these pieces as a financial therapist to understand. I was recently talking with a new client who in one conversation, we talked about her divorce, estate planning, taxes, cash flow and budgeting, hopes for a future romantic relationship, all in one conversation. And because of the dual training and understanding, I can understand and track with why and how all these things are related and why they're meaningful for them. And that's part of the really big part of the deal is people, when they're coming to financial therapy or looking for help with their finances, is they want to feel understood. They want to feel respected and they want to have a sense of dignity for what they've gone through. They don't want judgment or criticism or, well, you should have done this or why didn't you do that? Which is what happens, unfortunately, in both formal and informal context around people and money.
Okay. So then why would someone come to a financial therapist as opposed to a financial coach or a financial planner or a credit counselor? Like there's a lot of these different titles floating around out there, and it might be actually really helpful to sort of clarify what each of those are and how they help.
Yeah, I think, there's probably a couple of different reasons. And one of the reasons I think for students who have a coach in their life, right, the coach is for when you're doing well and you're ready to play the sport. But if you have a sprained ankle or a busted up shoulder that's stopping you from playing, you may still work with the coach so you stay up to speed, but you're not going to be doing the same level of training. You're going to go see the physical therapist, right? And so if you're trying to do your financial life and you're trying to make plans and playing the game of money, if you will, but you're having trouble actually engaging and doing it, like you try to sit down and do your budget and you just kind of get totally lost and distracted, or you end up in a fight with your intimate partner, well, then it's very hard to play the money game. So then you need to work with a financial therapist to help you figure out what is the injury or the problem that needs help to be resolved so that you can get back into playing the money game.
Okay. Makes sense. We have specialties for all these different things. And like you said, a coach is someone who gets you to your goal. So a financial coach might be like, you want to reach this certain net worth goal. You want to reach this debt pay down goal. Like I can give you the blueprint and the plan for how you might do that.
Right.
A financial planner, same kind of idea. It's a different certification. Coach versus planner. Coach is a little bit easier, I think, to obtain that certification. Financial planner requires a little bit more. There's nuances in terms of what they can recommend to you in terms of like what you can buy, or they can't sell you products. And I'm a financial therapist. I'm assuming you are going to act with what we call a fiduciary mentality. Can you explain to us what fiduciary means?
Yeah, and I want to clarify some of the professions, and I'll come around on the fiduciary piece. So the coach, a really good coach understands how to help people grow and move towards their goals, right? A therapist really understands how to help people heal. A financial planner in general is really good at technical advice. So I have all these moving pieces about how much money I should save. If I pull money out of this account, what happens to me from a tax perspective? Does this impact my future estate plan? And so they can give you a lot of technical knowledge from your financial picture and tell you, like, if you do this, this will happen. If you do this, this will happen. But they give you advice, and the expectation is you can take that advice and then implement it. So a lot of people aren't able to always take advice like, if you start saving $500 a month, then you'll be able to retire 5 years earlier. Okay, I understand that. But then if I don't start saving $500 a month, what am I going to do? The financial advisor will tell you, well, here's the math. This is what it is. So you should do that. But if you're not doing that, then we have that question of, do you need some coaching on maybe there's a few smaller steps to be able to actually do that? Like, how do I adjust my budget? Or maybe there's some deep fear about actually investing in the stock market because your grandparents lost all their money in the Great Depression. And so you have this message in your head that says it's dangerous to invest. Well, if you can't work with that memory, then to say it's actually safe to invest and feel comfortable doing that, you're going to stop doing the $500 a month. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. It's something a lot of us, I think, struggle with in many areas of our life. We know exactly what we're supposed to be doing,
Yes.
But the taking action on it for whatever reason sometimes doesn't happen. And sometimes it can be just understanding our thoughts, feelings around something. It could be our environment and the message we've been getting from home. Money in particular has a story behind it. You know, we're all in high school right now, and you are not a blank slate when it comes to money. Even if this is your first time sitting in a personal finance class, you are carrying
All
years
kinds of money
of,
stories.
yes. And like it can even go back multiple generations. Like Ed just said, like you will carry stuff from your grandparents through genetics and a lot of different ways passed on to you that are impacting your mentality, your mindset, your beliefs around money. So learning to identify those and break those down is going to be something that you might see on the mental health side of it rather than the financial planning side of it.
Yeah, big time. And because I'm talking to high school students and I had a recent experience, I get to work with people all over the country, with people with diverse backgrounds. And for your high school students that are sitting there wondering, why is history class relevant? Here's a very practical example. In high school, I learned about Tuskegee Airmen. I was recently working with a client whose parents were connected to that. There's a lot of meaning around what it means to have been a Tuskegee Airman. And had I not had that history lesson, it would have been lost on me about who this people group was, what was significant about Black Americans having a special unit while serving in World War II. So, as high school students, you may have a hard time connecting the relevance of some of the things that you're learning now. But if you start as you go into life, that information will come back up for you. So I just want to inspire students to understand that what you're learning may not feel relevant now, but it will have relevancy at some point. Us older adults are not just telling you the stuff for the fun of it. Like it does matter. But Rob, coming back to your question about the fiduciary standard. So for any of those students that are thinking about the law, this is where fiduciary comes into place. The law sets professional standards about what it means to serve clients. And within the business world, there are different legal expectations of different professions, right? So fiduciary standard is the highest standard of care for people, meaning you are supposed to be working in their best interest and their best interest only. In the financial services world, there are a number of products and incentive systems for people to sell financial products that may or may not actually be in the best interest of the clients. And so part of why the CFP is so valuable is you learn how to evaluate these financial products to understand their potential impact in clients' lives, both positive and negative. There's a lot of people that sell financial products that are only thinking about how much commission they'll get and not what the long range impact of this product is. I think about doctors, if they didn't study pharmaceuticals and they just were able to give pills because the pharmaceutical company told them this was a good pill, how dangerous that would be. But in effect, that's what we have in the financial services industry. Is we have financial institutions that create financial products and then tell financial advisors these are good products without them fully being able to evaluate them, and then they want them to go sell them. So you want to work with a financial planner that can truly evaluate financial products for what they can do, might do, and would be advised against doing for a client.
Okay, so fiduciary, just to recap, is the highest standard of care where someone is giving you advice, help, guidance without any kickback for themselves. It's all about you. It's not about their own personal gain. And you have to be very aware of that as you delve through the mountain of financial advice that's available to you on social media, via your friends, your family, whoever. Like, is there an alternative motivation behind the information being given? Is there advertising behind it? Is there affiliate income that comes from selling something? And you just have to make sure that the person giving the advice is only thinking about you and your best interests. And even that they're not handcuffed behind like a limited amount of products. Like you can have someone who's saying, this is the best product we have for you, but it could just be the best of a bad bunch. If there are any teachers watching right now, which hopefully there are, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you have looked into your 403B, there is no fiduciary standard in 403Bs. So you have to do all your own work to try and figure out what is the best of a really bad bunch in a lot of cases. But anyway,
Oh man.
let's not go down that rabbit hole because that's a really big one. Let's get into the main part of this, which is the mental health and money side. I did a quick check. Mental Health America said in 2022, there was just under 20% of adults had a diagnosed mental health challenge of some sort. The top two were anxiety and depression. But I think a common misconception is that mental health challenge means that it's something that's diagnosed, that we're not all facing something like this, or that it's something that is always with us, not with us, that it doesn't come and go. Can you tell us a little bit more about just what are the mental health challenges, or what is mental health status like in America right now, based on what you know? Big question, I know.
Yeah, it's a big question. And so I think one of the things to keep in mind is, let's see here, as a profession, we have to set some threshold that says at this level, then you're in poor mental health, right? There some crossover threshold. So when you look at what's commonly known as called the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, DSM-5, that's the tool that mental health professionals use to understand, does this person have anxiety, bipolar, ADHD, depression? What type of depression do they have? Do they have OCD, right? So all these names are all collected in this one big textbook. And when you look in that textbook and you look under OCD, it then says, does this person have fill in the blank this, 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 7, 8, 10 criteria, depending on the diagnosis. And if they have 3 or more, if they have 5 or more of these things, then they're in the threshold for having that diagnosis, right? The whole point of mental health diagnosis, not the whole point, a point of mental health diagnosis is to create a common language about what's happening between our ears and in our head, right? We need to have some vocabulary to describe what's happening to us. We use vocabulary to differentiate and define all kinds of things, right? And simply, we have all these bones in our body. But how do Rob and I, if we want to talk about a broken forearm, how do we don't just say broken bone, we say, I have a broken forearm, right? Because that then helps Rob know, like, we're talking about my forearm, not my thigh. Now, if Rob is trying to treat my broken arm, he would know, how many bones, Rob, are there in your forearm?
2.
Trick question, 2, right? So if he was wanting to help me, he was my doctor, he would need to know, is it the radius or the ulna? So we get more and more specific when we're trying to work with something. And that's what mental health diagnosis is trying to do, is trying to get more specific, is what are we actually looking at and talking about here? What's happening? Now, mental health diagnosis is part science and part art. And this is where because the mind and brain is an incredibly complex process, right? So what was I talking about before is we have thoughts, we have feelings, we have behaviors, we have a sense of self, and we have a sense of other. This is a very simple model for psychology. But all mental health diagnoses will fall into impacting one or all of these categories, right? Anxiety and depression is considered a mood disorder, how you feel about yourself. But there's also, it's a sense of who am I too, often connected to the anxious feelings. And you can have thoughts, ruminating thoughts, or you can have suppressed thoughts. So mental health, we're trying to evaluate these 5 pieces and put in criteria. Yeah. How do I say this? Let me stop there and let's see what question you have.
I think it makes sense, like that it's going to impact us in lots of different ways, that it's not a clear-cut thing. And we have these labels. We humans, I think, love to label things because it creates partitions. It allows us, like you said, to identify, to talk with a common language. So yeah, there's a lot of different labels out there that we relate to mental health. And as you said, if you meet a certain threshold, you get the official diagnosis label, but you may have certain characteristics of any of these and not have a diagnosis. And they're still going to impact your thoughts, feelings, behaviors, sense of self, and relationship to others. So there's 2 ways that this is going to go. There's the, how does money impact our mental health? And then how does our mental health impact our money? I want to start with, let me see what I put in my list. So which mental health situations are going to challenge us when it comes to our money? So like, what are some things that we might come across, either ourselves, our families, our friends, that are going to have an impact on our finances? And we could start with just depression and anxiety. Like, do they have an impact on how we earn money, spend money, give it?
All of it, yes. So, right, depression is kind of that lethargy, feeling less energy, less ability to focus and want to do things. And so when you show up for school, and if you're working with depression, how much harder is it to get a B or an A in class? How much harder is it to enjoy being there at school? How much harder is it to show up to work? If the depression gets heavy enough or significant enough, you stop showing up to school, which means you stop learning, right? If you have heavy enough or deep enough depression, you can't go to work. I went through a period where I had major depression and I could not work. I could not even make myself go work. That's when you know, like sometimes we can like, I don't really feel like doing that. And then you kind of override and you go to school or you go to work and you get it done. Right. But when you get into what's called major depression, it is crippling and it will stop you from going to work and being able to make money. Right. It also means you're probably less likely to socially interact with your colleagues. And being able to socially interact with your colleagues at work is often imperative to professional success. Right. So if you're depressed, you're going to be less pro-social, and being pro-social and relationally engaged is a part of career success for most professions.
Makes sense.
Same. Go ahead.
I would say that makes sense, like that it would reduce our ability to potentially earn, and then also to increase our earnings because we're not building that network and allowing ourselves the ability to climb a corporate ladder if there is one, or to move into different jobs, whatever it is. Yes, you're limiting your ability to increase your financial health.
Or even show up and really enjoy the fact that you're a teacher and you're teaching students, right? Like if you feel depressed. So that's the career side. But if you're struggling with depression, you're going to be less motivated to look at your cash flow and your spending, because there will be and this is that kind of feedback loop, is when I look at those numbers, it just further deepens my sense of depression, or I can't bring myself to look at and understand and make sense of that information. You're also less likely to be future oriented, which is a part of financial well-being, is to balance living in the present and having future orientation. And when you're struggling with depression, you're stuck in the here and now only. And it's hard to imagine life going forward. So if it's hard to imagine life is going forward, why would you plan for the future?
So I can see straight away that would like impact maybe saving for retirement, saving for in general, like you might start spending all your money. So it's going to impact our spending habits, our avoidance of potentially maybe looking at our credit cards and our debt and seeing how that's piling up. So we let that start snowballing. Bills don't get paid. Yeah, I can definitely see that happening. Anything else that you would see really impacting our finances?
I mean, for this conversation, that's probably a good start.
And then how about if we have family members who are struggling in some way? Like, how does that impact our finances, or does it?
Yeah, well, I think, right, it's if you're watching mom or dad or step parents struggling with depression, it's going to impact their ability to go to work, their willingness to engage and talk with you as a developing young adult about money. You're going to see the consequences of not having the financial resources potentially around it. So many of my clients recall stories of their parents being overwhelmed. This is the anxiety side of things. So anxious and so overwhelmed by trying to make money that they just like, I just don't even know what to do. It feels paralyzing. Right. And so when we think a part of mental health and part of our brain's job is to regulate the flow of information that we're experiencing in life, both external information as well as bodily based information. And the brain is trying to constantly process all of this information. And when it's working well, it can make sense out of it. and make meaning and organize the information to create a nice flow for you. So, but if you're with someone that's anxious, you're not able to integrate the experience quite as well. You're not able to make sense out of it. As humans, we're designed to be interactive. And when we have anxiety or depression, we're not as interactive as we can be, right? I don't know for sure right now Rob's full mental state of mind, but at least I'm experiencing him as present and engaged in the conversation, which makes me talking with him very easy, and I'm able to enjoy it and it's pleasurable. I'm not getting anxious, which is emotional arousal, or depression, which is emotional suppression, right? So a big part of mental health stems from emotional regulation.
So just to kind of recap on that, it's going to have impacts on a lot of different aspects of our money, whether you are paying attention to it, how you're spending, how you're saving, investing for the future, your potential outlook on risk tolerance, I think might be impacted in some way as well. Let's flip it over then. So if money is not plentiful, we typically see that it can have a negative impact on mental health. My wife is a therapist as well, and she's told me countless times about how clients are struggling with money, and that seems to be feeding their mental health challenges. And it's one of those, like, we're not sure which one is the chicken egg sort of situation, but it seems like they go hand in hand together.
Yeah, I think at this point I would make the argument that they're reciprocal. It's circular. There is no true start. So the nice thing about that is you can start on either side of it and work with it to improve the other side. So whether you're working on the mental health side or you're working on the money side, they're deeply interrelated. Yes. So part of living in society is being able to have access to money to pursue meeting basic needs, as well as what's the word I want to look at? More aspirational needs and social belonging needs. So what do I mean by that? There's a common phrase in the financial world that now really makes me upset, to be quite honest. People differentiate wants and needs, but I think when we really look at it, they're all psychological needs. And Dr. Sarah Newcomb does a lot of great work on this in her book Loaded. But I also think there's the human systems model, which says we have a variety of human needs. And while we prioritize and say, well, if we don't eat or drink water, we will die, more than if we don't go on a vacation or have some aspirational dreams. But when we look at human flourishing, we're really able to meet those basic needs as well as the full aspirational or self-actualization needs. That's when we feel fully alive. When I'm living into the purpose of my life, I'm meeting my social relational needs and I'm meeting my survival or instinctual needs. They're all needs for this full picture of flourishing. And so mental health is about trying to help people reconnect and access that full experience of being human. So when we don't have money, it makes it hard to get food and water sometimes, shelter. Sometimes it means we can't participate in going to family gatherings, or it's sporting events or birthday parties, or having the clothes. Clothes at this age are a big part of social belonging. We use clothes as a part of our group identity. We create in-groups and out-groups based on the types of clothes we wear or don't wear. Some part of this is developmental psychologically. Some of this is cultural. But being able to have clothing that helps you belong to your group matters. And then having money to pursue for high school students, right? They're on this question of how am I going to fund for college? This is doing college as part of making meaning and this big journey through life. Do I have money? Where am I going to get that? So the stress and anxiety of not knowing how to figure that out can definitely feed into mental health issues.
Yeah. So when there is no money, there's challenges that come with it. And when there's a lot of money, there can also be challenges that come with that. I've heard people like really struggling with decision fatigue and not knowing what to do when there is an excess of money, when it's no longer just about core needs and how do I deal with that. It's a probably a nicer problem to have than not having enough.
Oh,
But
no, I will challenge you to that one, my
please do.
friend. It's because I think this is what we want to be thoughtful is psychological distress is psychological distress. And when we look at this is that self or identity piece, and I have had more than enough people end up in worlds of affluence where it is absolutely crippling for them. And so that sense of self and who am I in the reality of wealth. So many of us aspire to wealth. And then what I know because of the work that I've done and the studies I've done is once you actually get there, what it actually feels like, how you actually see yourself will often be different than what the expectation is. In a way that makes this more approachable. Everyone here is a high school student. Everyone had some idea what high school was going to be like. And then they had a reality of what high school has been like for them. For some, there's been a pretty decent congruence between that. And for some, there's been a big dislocation, right? And that navigating that has to do with your own sense of self and your social support system. So if we have a strong, loving, supportive, caring, nurturing support system, then navigating these changes in identity and social location move more smoothly. But if we have an insecure sense of ourself, if we are able to cross the thresholds into new levels of wealth, boy, it can really crumble us.
Interesting. Wouldn't have thought of it that way, but yeah, I can see that. I've had people I've known from the personal finance space who have gotten to retirement, like they've gotten to financial independence where they no longer need to work. And then there's a huge mental breakdown when it comes to who am I now? Like I've worked so hard for this point where I now no longer need to work. And now there's a total crisis of what do I do with myself? I don't need to work anymore. So now what do I do with all this money? And sometimes it just ends up being like, they have to figure it out, or they go blow the money, or they give it all away. So they have to keep working, or they do something that, like you said, restores that homeostasis in themselves and their identity.
Right. So that's the thing is when we get so singular focused on like income and wealth accumulation to bring us to a desired state of being. And then once we get there and it doesn't actually give us what we thought it would give us, we fall apart. And I know this from personal experience. I've lived this story. Like this is part of my story and why I'm so passionate about this topic is and shifting that focus from financial independence and like making money at all costs to we're on this beautiful life journey. We need to develop well-meaning and a sense of identity and purpose that will suit us over the whole course of our life. And of course, we need money, but money is more the supporting actor than the main character, right? And when we make money the main character and we become the supporting actor, it's not fun. It's not great. We're not enjoying life nearly as much as we can. So how we hold and understand and develop money philosophy is just as important as knowing how to budget. And, I think what's challenging is many people that do that FIRE movement or that early have experienced financial deprivation or pain earlier. And they have this idea that if I just have enough money, then I will feel secure and safe. And they cross that threshold into whatever the number is. And then they realize, I don't actually feel any safer or more secure. But this is the meaning making side is we are meaning making creatures and we give meaning to money. If there's a meaning we can come up with, we've given it to money. Right?
Yeah. And it sounds like I don't really need to ask this question, but that statement, money can't buy happiness, sounds like something that you would buy into. Is that true?
I think with a little nuance, yes. So there is very clear research that you do need a certain amount of money in order to have happiness, right? This is like, there's not joy in poverty necessarily. I realize there are people that find ways to live joyfully in poverty. But if we're not able to meet those needs, then it's going to impact our happiness. But what it says is there's a diminishing return above a certain level of income. And to some degree, there's the average, and I haven't seen the number recently, but it was something like $70,000 or $80,000 a year. But here's the thing: context matters. Because $70,000 or $80,000 a year in New York City will be miserable. But $70,000 to $80,000 a year in Cincinnati might be pretty incredible. Right? Because we do use social referencing, and there are objective costs to living. And so if you're paying $3,000 a month for rent, you can only take money so far. So we need to be able to earn enough money to have good proportionality. And this is kind of where that nutrition concept comes into play. Is we want to have a balance of different types of nutritions coming into our body to be healthy. The same is true for our finances. I think that's also part of what happens when people get hyper focused on the future and savings, is they lose contact with how to enjoy themselves around money. And for me now, one of the points of money is pleasure and joy and relationship. And if you're so focused on the future and accumulation, you kind of lose touch with knowing how to build pleasure into your day-to-day life, and also how to take pleasure in non-monetary things. That's also a big part of financial well-being. So, right, money can't fully buy happiness. Being able to go out and take a walk and just enjoy nature for what nature is incredibly satisfying.
So we have a question on our sheets about strategies for protecting our mental health and wealth at the same time. And I feel like there's a great one here somewhere. But if we have students who are very hyper focused on making money right now, and for a lot of you, you are in this lower stage of meeting your needs, where when we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you're at the lowest stage of physical needs. You're trying to buy the things that you really need and want right now. And we haven't really graduated yet to some of these self-actualization needs that maybe you've been talking about, Ed. What are some ways that we can start seeing that bigger picture and stop making it just about the money and thinking about the other things that are going to bring us happiness throughout our lives?
That's a good question. I think, having conversations with older adults, people at different stages of life, and asking them questions about what has worked well for you in your financial life and what has not worked out so well. I think so. There's gaining perspective and wisdom from people that have been there and done that. And as a teenager, that's hard to do sometimes and hard to imagine. And not all of what you hear will be fully relevant now. And some of it, there's a lot of things happening for you as a teenager, right? You're preparing to transition from being financially dependent on your folks to being more financially dependent on yourself. And that's a progression that's not a light switch for most people. Some in high school may be already mostly financially self-sufficient because of family and other circumstances. Some may have not yet thought about money at all and any financial responsibility. So we have a wide dispersion. So self-awareness about where am I at on my journey of taking responsibility for money in my life? What is that like? That's self-reflection. I think also one of the biggest things that you can do is to try to adopt the mindset that this is a lifetime's journey of learning. And so there's no need to put pressure on yourself to have it all figured out. And also really important, it's okay to make money mistakes. This is really, really important, because learning process is more important than outcome. What I mean by that is you don't know what you don't know, and you're going to have financially scraped knees. Now, I hope you don't have financial amputations where you lose a metaphorical financial arm. But if you do, there are prosthetics. So, I'm blending analogies, Robert. I love the smile that I'm seeing. Is
going really deep with this one. Okay.
Yeah. I've kind of become like financial planner, philosopher, priest, therapist, and somehow I try to just also remember, Ed, you're a normal guy. You're a high school student. For any high school students that are listening, I was a B, C-ish student I had no expectations on myself that I would go to college. My family did not have that expectation of me. I left high school to become a professional firefighter and chase my high school sweetheart. And fast forward, I'm now 41 and I have three master's degrees. I'm married to a dentist and an incredible person. My life has turned out completely unlike I expected. But when we talk about money and money journey, in my early 20s, after getting out of high school, I started to really see more and more how important money was. And I've been on this quest to understand how to create financial security for myself, for my family, how to have a loving and healthy relationship with my wife around money. So all of this that I'm sharing comes out of my own need to figure these things out. And I can tell you, I have had more than my fair share of financial scraped knees. And let's just be honest, a couple few financial amputations.
You've lost a couple of toes. Okay.
Yeah, you know,
Yeah. In terms of the strategies, then, so kind of summarize,
yeah,
finding mentors or just talking to people who have done this already. So finding a wide variety of people, asking you, what was your experience, maybe leaving high school? What are some things you would have done differently? Talking to much older people, I mean, like, as you reflect back on your life, is there anything you would have done differently? Um, there's a friend of ours, Doc G, who wrote a book, and he based a lot of it on what people described as they were approaching their last days and the regrets they had around finances and wealth. And most of them, none of them, I don't think, said, I wish I'd worked more.
yeah.
No one comes to the end of life and be like, you know what? I wish I'd worked more. I wish I'd made more money. They may have said, like, I wish I had pursued my dream career. I had been bolder in terms of chasing things that would have brought more wealth and happiness, but very few are like, I wish I'd worked harder or devoted more time to this, or that I just had more money sitting in my bank account. And that was a very powerful thing for me to hear as well.
I want to pick up on that because that's really important. I think this is where a lot of your students are. And this is, please hear, I'm not making light of this because this is very challenging dynamic. But there's a lot of students that have some idea about what they want to do with their life, and their parents or a parent or family or culture have a very different idea about what they should do with their life. And this creates incredible stress between the individuals. And what I can say for folks that are in their late 30s, 40s, and 50s that didn't actually go after what was true to them, it's kind of two things. It's a little weird, Rob. There's regret and gratitude. Because once they step into who they really authentically want to be, they bring together the other pieces that were kind of imposed on them. Right. But so whether you out of high school go after what you truly want and what's most lights you up, even if it's not the safest or more stable or congruent with what your family wants, you're going to have your heartaches around that, and that's okay. But you'll know how to be authentic. If you go and follow whatever your family or your community tells you to do, that's going to be okay too, because what you're going to get from that are some lessons that will support whatever it is that you truly are supposed to do with your life when you decide to do that. So I think there's this feeling that we've got to figure out the right path forward through life. And what I can say is by the time you get to the middle of life, it all converges. No matter whether you pick the true to yourself or the true to the family path, in the middle of life, they converge and flip oftentimes.
And I think that's the idea, that there is one path and you're supposed to figure out what your path is and then get yourself on that path. And there's so many different ones. Like, you will spend
Yeah.
your life figuring out who you are and who you want to be. And I like what you said, that it's a progression, not an outcome. Like, financial literacy, you are never going to be financially literate in the sense that you will know everything there is to know about money. It's impossible. We're always learning more, and then there's such a huge body of knowledge out there already that you will never know everything. So if you instead decide, I'm going to be a lifelong learner and devote, some of my time to being aware of what's coming up new, maybe listening to a podcast, reading a book, talking to people who've been there before, and just being like open to new information and adding that to what you know already. That's a great way to approach any topic in life, whether it's money, happiness, health, wealth, relationships. Like, you can apply it to anything you could possibly think of. You're never done. you're never done learning. And
No, and I think hopefully finding joy in learning, right? And that's look, I realize as a high school student that might be hard to take in. Some of you probably do love learning, but some of you are there out of obligation and duty, and because you would get truancy notices and your parents would be pissed off if you didn't go to school. I get it, right? But if you can figure out what lights you up and gets you excited about learning, you can overcome all kinds of obstacles. Joy is the secret ingredient to loving learning. Finding what you're passionate and curious about will carry you way faster and further. And in the end, the grades don't matter. If you're learning what you're interested in learning about, that's the mots.
I think that's very true. And I found that as well. Like high school, it was meh. Like there wasn't something that truly lit me up really until I got to college and afterwards, especially personal finance. I didn't discover this whole world until I was in my mid-20s. And that totally changed my trajectory as a teacher and who I wanted to be and how I wanted to help this world. So give yourself that grace that you don't have to figure it out right now. Like pick something, use what you know now to guide your path and try and limit the financial amputations to mostly scraped knees. So make financial decisions now that are not going to put you in a huge debt hole if possible, so that you have that flexibility and freedom to make choices as you move forward in your 20s and 30s. And that's what money truly gives a lot of us, is freedom and flexibility to pursue these new ideas, new paths, new things that we discover as they pop up, and we don't feel locked into what we're doing.
Oh, Rob, can I add another thing?
Absolutely.
So as high school students, you're starting to date. And one of the tips or tricks I would encourage you to do, if you're ever so bold, is if you're confident enough to kiss them, you're confident enough to ask them about their family and money.
I wasn't sure where you're going with
that. Well, I'm trying to be, mindful that we're talking to high school students, but what I'm saying is families organize and have very different philosophies around money. And big part of my push and my work, Rob, is around financial intimacy, which is all about couples feeling safe, honored, trusted, and vulnerable with each other around money. And when you date people, you're gonna find those places of difference in your financial philosophies and outlooks. That can either be destructive or constructive. Destructive or constructive. If we can honor and recognize the strengths of our differences, we become a very powerful team together. But if we see each other's financial differences as annoying, abrasive, not helpful, stupid, destructive. So when you're dating and you're learning about yourself and the other person, you are going to find differences in the way you approach and think about money. Guarantee it, 100%. If you find someone where you see everything eye to eye, I will send you a $100 bill. Go ahead and just send me an email. You're going to find differences, right? Rob, you have differences with your wife about how you see money.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. My wife and I do not see money exactly the same to eye to eye. That doesn't mean that we also don't have great places of overlap. So we're not going to be 100% different, and we're not going to be 100% on the same page, or different and together. Neither 100% together or 100% at odds. It's some ratio, and that's true for all couples. But if we can really enjoy the benefits of our differences and see them as opportunities and strengths, that really changes the game.
Okay, and I want to switch over to our Q&A part of this. So if you are watching live and you have a question, please drop it in the chat so we can answer it. If you're watching the replay, feel free to leave your question in the comment section of this video, and Ed or myself will try and get in there and respond to those for you. But I had one from a couple of students I was telling about this beforehand, and one came from Amelia, and she just wanted to know, does more money correlate or equal better mental health? Is there like a correlation between the two, or is it kind of like they have a relationship, but it's not like one feeds the other?
Ooh, well, and I think if we're talking about statistics, correlation versus causation is a big difference. I would say there's probably some degree of correlation. I have to go back and look at the research literature. but yes, I think on the whole there is a relationship between financial well-being and mental health for sure. They are correlated. And this is kind of what we have been talking about, Rob, right? Um is it chicken or the egg? Which one causes which? And when you think about things as circular instead of linear, it kind of changes the whole conversation. So yes, I think at the same token, what I would be caution us to be mindful of is money it is not the sole determinant of your mental health. And it may not be the starting point of causing your mental health issues, but it may inflate them. It can, but um, to some degree, when this is a little deeper into the mental health world, but I think a lot of our mental health disorders actually start in infancy and early childhood. This comes out of the ACE research, adverse childhood experiences. So when we look at early childhood developmental trauma, there's a lot of connection with that to later onset mental health issues. So that's before kind of the money piece is coming in. And yet the adults that are raising us are having to navigate the money world. And is it a stressor? So it's a really beautiful web, but it's complicated.
Not the key word. It's complicated. Money is not the sole contributor, cause, nothing. It certainly adds fuel to the fire in whatever way you want to think about it, but it's not going to be one equals the other. We will probably point out, though, that you mentioned before there is like a threshold for income that if you have a certain threshold of income, you typically see like an increase in happiness as you hit that threshold. And once it goes beyond that, it's sort of your core needs are met. And now it becomes more about what are you doing with your life and all these other parts we've talked about. With mental health, we would also probably point out that if you at least have money, you can do things like hire a therapist to help you navigate those things. And there's different privileges and benefits that money provides that those who don't have it don't get to access. So I think there is certainly something there.
Oh, I mean, that opens up a huge can of worms, of course. And right, there is having means to pay for professional services like therapy or other healthcare is a huge issue in our country. And the irony is there are the people that are literally resource constrained and can't afford the price level of the service. And then there are people that have the psychological constraint. They make enough money, but they won't psychologically tell themselves, I don't make enough money to pay for this. Right. And either of those are a barrier to getting the help that you need.
Oh, I definitely find myself in that latter situation sometimes where we have money, like we make enough. We are definitely, not struggling for money, but making decisions that might even support core needs or health. Like it sometimes boils down to, oh, we don't have enough for that. We can't fit that in our budget. And that's, like you said, a different attitude about money that's, is probably rooted in something totally different, but exploring that is part of the fun. And if you're not thinking about yourself in that way, that's where we should probably be starting. I'm guessing is like just being aware of what do you say when a purchasing decision comes up? How do you act? Do other people give you feedback? Like, what are you talking about? You make tons of money, or are you really supposed to be spending that? Like, you sure you have enough? You weren't able to buy food last week. And just how do I act around money? And then if you can start becoming aware of that, then I think that's at least gives you that first step towards understanding yourself and maybe how your story is impacting your money.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
All right. So, Ed, I want to wrap this up before we hit the top of the hour. The final question I have for you is what is your number one piece of advice for teens when it comes to building wealth?
Oh, hmm. Learn how to love yourself and be loved by others.
Sounds really easy.
Oh yeah, it's like they'll finish it by lunchtime. No, this comes out of research and lived experience. Is relational wealth is incredibly important. Being able to be comfortable both with yourself and with others, knowing that you're loved is a really big deal because it'll allow you to pursue money in a more meaningful and less destructive way, in a more balanced way. Here's the problem, right? When people become so wealth focused, and they build a lot of high income or wealth, and they get to their 50s and they're married and they don't know how to feel loved or love their intimate partner or family, they end up bankrupted both financially and relationally. So it's a long arc deal, but if you can start out and you're launching high school and being able to answer both of these questions in the affirmative, I am loved and I know how to feel loved, you're light years ahead of where you need to be. So that, like, as much as you need to know the technical workings of money, you need to know how to and get yourself to that feeling of feeling loved in your body, not just an intellectual, yeah, I know my mom and dad love me, but like that feeling in your body of feeling loved and being able to extend that, because love is a reciprocal process. So if you spend all the time loving, but you don't ever feel loved, problems.
And I think it's amazing advice. I would just hate to stop there without this follow-up question. If someone is listening and they don't feel that, like they're like, I don't necessarily feel loved, I don't love myself, or I don't know how to love others, is there a first step that you would recommend they take to potentially get towards that point?
Yeah, start Googling attachment styles.
Attachment styles. Okay. And what are we looking for?
Attachment styles and attachment theory, it's a whole field of psychology, and it studies human relationships. And attachment styles are an approximation of love and the experience of love relationships.
Okay. So if you're watching and you're like, I'm not sure how to answer those questions yet, start there. Google attachments, attachment theory and different styles of attachment. Just see what you find. Start learning a little bit more about it, learn a little bit more about yourself, and start building towards this goal of loving yourself, loving others, and knowing that you are loved. I love that. It's a really very different piece of advice than anything we've gotten so far here. So thank you so much.
You're welcome, Rob. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you today. And I wish I could have seen all the wonderful students' faces as we were having this conversation, but I've held you in my mind. And I just hope that you each have a wonderful launch into your young adulthood, and know that there's an abundance of love and support and financial resources all out there for you. And there's incredible people like Rob that want to help you along that journey. You don't have to do it alone.
Thank you so much for being here today. And thank you all for watching in your classrooms or at home. We appreciate you being here.